I'd like to tell you about two presidential candidates, two parties, one slogan. And I'd like to see if you can guess who I'm talking about. And if you do, please put it in the comments along with what gave it away. The first candidate launched his campaign on Labor Day, stressing his experience both as a governor and a union president. His most notable contribution to politics up until that time was modern gun control legislation. He was an outsider to politics when he first ran for office and chose to give his speech in front of the Statue of Liberty for reasons that will soon become clear. The point of his speech? America is broken, but he could fix things. All you had to do is make sure he got elected, and everything would be different. He made clear two things in particular made America great: unions and immigrants. He believed this is what makes America what he called the shining city on a hill, what makes the American dream possible. Now, the second candidate was even more of a political outsider, running as a third-party candidate at the suggestion of the then governor of Minnesota, at the time one of his biggest supporters. When asked about his ideal running mate, he said he'd prefer Oprah Winfrey, though she was not interested in running for office at the time. The primary focus of his campaign was universal health care. He also proposed a 14% tax on people with a net worth over $10 million in order to pay down the national debt, fund Social Security, and cut taxes on the middle class. They both ran for presidency on the same slogan: "Let's make America great again." Trump, as you know, shortened it to "Make America Great Again." Trump's candidacy was in the year 2000 when he was running against Pat Buchanan, which he would not win. My point in telling these two stories isn't just to illustrate how much politics has changed over the last couple decades, but also, as they say, idolizing a politician is like believing the stripper really likes you. Politicians, especially capitalist politicians, will say whatever they need to win on the campaign trail, and this is true of both parties. I am happy that the shutdown is over, even though it was a drastic failure. I was actually worried that the plan might be to just never open the government again, because Trump would certainly benefit from that. He doesn't want Congress, and he would probably do better if his policies were just enacted by decree, and that might be what they try next time. But make no mistake, the current conditions of inflation, high prices, austerity are not the policies of capitalism failing. This is the intention of capitalism, is to concentrate wealth and use austerity to do so. We have high grocery prices because of corporate consolidation. We have no affordable housing, not because we don't have housing, but because housing is used for speculation and investment rather than actually, housing families. Either we have programs to help the poor, or people die in the streets. Or we don't have capitalism at all, and we build a system of economic democracy based on human need and sustainability rather than short-term profit for the few. Obviously, I prefer the latter, and this is something that is well within our power to do, because workers do actually have all the power, but we have to collectively decide to fight for this. And I do know firsthand the pain of the U.S. healthcare system. I was on an 80-20 plan. It cost me 40% of my take-home pay just for my premium, and this wasn't even full coverage. Just to ensure my spouse and I had to get a second job, and I was still left with thousands of dollars of debt when I had a basic surgery. I even confronted the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield when he came to UNC to talk to students and employees of the healthcare system, thinking that it would be a nice, calm networking event. He was not expecting difficult questions, and he had just taken over as CEO. So at the time, I was making approximately the median wage at UNC. I asked him if he thought 40% of the net pay of a UNC employee was a reasonable cost for a premium. And I really wish I would have recorded this, because he was definitely not prepared for this question, but he blamed everyone except insurers. He blamed doctors, hospitals, the government, patients, the legal system. Everything except Blue Cross Blue Shield was to blame, obviously. And things did get a little better when I moved to Minnesota. My premium is much lower, but ultimately this just means the University of Minnesota is paying all of that premium. I do have much better healthcare coverage, but the thing is, when the University of Minnesota is paying upwards of $24,000 in premiums every year, so Medica just from my premium, was making approximately as much as I was as far as net pay for me working full time. They're getting as much compensation as I am, which is absurd. That is absurd, you know? And obviously, most of this is not coming out of my paycheck. My premiums are very low, but I have to believe that my pay would be higher if the U of M didn't have to pay all of that premium. It might not cost me directly, but it's definitely costing me. It's one reason wages are so low, because employers have to account for that cost and they adjust wages accordingly. And nothing will change under capitalism. The reason our healthcare system is what it is, the reason that we have this fight, is because we have a for-profit system. And Obamacare wasn't even that great of a system. It wasn't a single-payer healthcare system. Our costs really didn't go down. It was just a big giveaway to corporations. The only thing that made it affordable was that it was taxpayer funded. But they were still making tons of profit. It was ultimately a handout to them. Because it benefits the working class, it's something that has to be axed to pay for the tax cuts that Trump first passed, Biden didn't undo. And you know that they're not going to cut military spending. They never cut the things that the owning class wants. They always go for austerity against the people that have the least power and that it'll hurt most. So they're going to go after healthcare, they're going to go after Social Security and education and any kind of social safety net that they can attack, they will. All the things the Republicans do, the Democrats laid the table for, especially with a political strategy that always appealed to Republican voters and never to anything to the left. Even leftist policies that were incredibly popular, they might campaign on them, but they don't actually pass them. They didn't codify Roe. They're not going to raise the minimum wage anytime soon. They seem fine with throwing immigrants and trans people under the bus, even if they're not as bad as the Republicans. We can see the Democrats, they are in service of the owning classes. They might campaign on these things, but they don't actually intend to keep them or pass them. Even when they have power, you can see what happens. There'll be someone that will defect and side with the owning class, and they'll blame those few people, but the party as a whole, oh, no, it's not their fault. It's just, it always happens to be the case that someone does this. Every single time. It's convenient. And I'm not saying the two parties are the same. They obviously differ on social issues and wedge issues. There is a difference between the Christian nationalism that Trump is pushing and the neoliberalism of the Democrats. They do have different policies, but economically they're very similar, especially when it comes to the way that they treat the working class and how they serve the owning classes. And ultimately that is what we're seeing right now, is that there is a almost civil war between the owning classes deciding if we're going to go for the oligarchy of Trump or continue with the neoliberalism of the Democrats. It is the same policies with a lighter touch and basically different marketing, especially when it comes to human rights and social policies. We deserve more and we need better than not as bad as Trump. That's not a winning strategy. You're going to see the ratchet effect keep going. The Overton window is so far to the right that within the political mainstream, the farthest left we go is right-center liberalism, and that's it. And it isn't just the Republicans that have done this. It is the choice of the Democrats as well. And although the Democrats say that they want our support, what they want is our votes. They don't want us to come in the party and make it an anti-capitalist party. I've never advocated for that anyway, because the farthest left most Democrats will go is a capitalist welfare state. And a capitalist welfare state relies on the exploitation of the global south. When poor nations elect a leftist, they don't build a welfare state. They nationalize industries because they don't have people that they can exploit to fund that welfare state. All major changes that have benefited the working class have come through grassroots organizing of working people. It's never been a gift that's been bestowed to us by any political party. At best, we have pressured political parties into passing things like, there's a reason a lot of the environmental legislation came under Nixon. It was because there was a lot of public pressure to do that. It wasn't because Nixon was some staunch environmentalist. We can't guilt them into doing the right thing. They are always going to be beholden to the owning classes because they are both capitalist parties and they are funded by capitalism. The tools we have as a working class is working class solidarity. We have our labor that builds this wealth. And if we want to change things, we have to fold our hands and refuse to grant them our labor until we have concessions. And from that, we can build a working class movement that is democratic and that can enact real change outside the two parties of capitalism. So please join me. We have more than enough to go around. It's time that we build a system of egalitarian economic and political democracy that is sustainable and benefits all working people.